right, so we are live. So let's see, we have folks starting to join, and I'm sure more folks will join as the previous sessions end. So hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending where in the world you are joining us from. So I'm Jessica Siegel. I will be your host with the most for this session today. You are in for a treat because if you are in the right place for Beyond the Usual Suspects, Academia and Practitioner, I'm so happy to have John and Akin with us here this morning. And I just want to hand it right over to them, let them introduce themselves so we can dive right in and get through as much content as humanly possible in a short amount of time. So with that, I will turn it on over.
Oh, brilliant, Jessica. Thank you so much. It's such a joy and a treat to be here and to get a chance to have a little bit of fun here in middle of the day. It's towards the end of the day for Akin and myself here in the UK. My name's John Wills. I'm the CEO of Acentic, and I'm also a learning design specialist with about 20 years experience in working for business schools and consulting companies, doing what we all love, which is helping people learn and experience new and exciting opportunities. Akin?
Hey, and I'm Akin Omobitan, ideas curator at Acentic, and I research positive psychology, behavioral science, and bring ideas to life.
Brilliant. Speaking of ideas to life, we're going to just share this short video with you. For those of you who are fans of old films, Casablanca is probably one of the great classics. Rounding up the usual suspects. When we think about this in the context of the people that we choose to collaborate with, we have a tendency to look towards those individuals that maybe have already published a few seminal works. Thinking of works like people like Simon Sinek and Carol Dweck and some of the other luminaries that are in our collective spaces. But we want to talk to you a little bit today about not always looking for those people that already have established their reputations in a particular area, but looking beyond the usual suspects as you're beginning to build or continuing to build your network. And I'd just like to give you a little bit of my thoughts on this. We as learning development professionals have an obligation, responsibility, and truly a passion for finding the latest thinking and finding ways to incorporate that into training programs that drive real learning and change. And for us to be able to achieve that goal, sometimes we have to look beyond the usual suspects. So what we'd like to do in this session is we'd like to take a few minutes and share with you our experiences about some of the work that we've done through Acentic, where we've been able to partner with academics and consulting companies. And I'd like to start by telling you a bit of a story, and Acentic stories are what we're about. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story about the Kennedy School of Government Senior Executive Fellows Program. We were approached by the Harvard University, and they invited us to be part of a seminal research study that they were running to help see what the impact would be of positive psychology and best self-activation on not only health and well-being, your physical health, but also that of your, in terms of your cognitive and mental ability in the context of a team exercise. So if for those of you who may be familiar with the Senior Executive Fellows Program, it's a group of individuals who are managers and professionals from the US government and their international counterparts, typically senior military officers, corporate managers, and also others working in the public sector. They are asked to participate in a multi-week program in Boston. I'm sure, and it's also, by the way, it's being run virtually now. I just went online and updated that, and it's starting again in June. And what they do is they're given a particular disaster. So in this particular case, a hurricane or regrettably a pandemic, which they also looked at, or anything, earthquakes, tsunamis, any sort of droughts in the Midwest, whatever it may be. And they're asked to work together as a team across functional areas to find solutions for this situation. And it's a very real simulation in the sense that they're given a disaster, and then every day when they get up in the morning, there are newspapers put on if they're doing this face to face, they're actually a newspaper in front of their rooms in the dorm rooms or the hotels, which talk about what's going on with the pandemic or the disaster on that particular day. We were invited to participate in this by providing the Acentic point positive. And the point positive works by allowing people to get feedback of when they're at their best by reaching out to their network, and the network shares stories of their best selves. These are compiled into reports, and then the reports are provided to the individuals in this that are participating in the Senior Executive Fellow. Interestingly enough, the way that study was done, it was a blind study, and what they did was they gave half of the participants their 360-degree feedback, what we call the point positive, at the beginning of the workshop, and they were invited to read that and share that amongst themselves, what the stories said about who they were at their best. And the other group was given a traditional 360. And then at the end of the program, they of course got their point positive. They were then given the mock crisis to solve, and then they were asked to manage, and they were judged on their performance and solution. The initial data from this study, which lasted about 18 months, was that those teams that received their point positive reports up front actually had a much better result in terms of being able to work effectively as a team and also to solve the problems in a more creative and innovative way. So this was the data that came out of this report. Then the scientists and academicians at Harvard then looked to put this together into a study and then have the study eventually published in a major journal. In addition to doing the work at Harvard, we also did studies. We also participated in additional studies on this very same subject with the U.S. Air Force and with other companies as well. And all of this data was then aggregated into this research that was then put forward for publishing. So that's where we are with this particular situation. And what we wanted to do now is we wanted to move just to share that story with you. And what we'll do is we'll tell you the outcome of the story and where it is currently at the end of the session. So the next thing we wanted to do is wanted to ask you to think about how you might go about looking for and identifying potential partners to partner with, whether that be academic institutions or consulting companies or individuals that you may know that are themselves working on cutting edge research and thinking. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to invite Akin to join the conversation as well. And Akin and I are going to have a bit of a conversation around this. And also remember, if you have any questions as I'm going through, please go ahead and type those up in the feed, the session feed, and we'll try to answer those at the end of the session. So Akin, I wanted to just very quickly invite you into the conversation and just say that one of the things that we learned, and I know you were part of this as well, but one of the things that we learned, there are three key elements to how you would select a partner. The first is, what criteria are you using to consider a collaboration? So so is it about trying to get cutting edge thinking, or is it about technology, or is it about leadership development, or is it about mindfulness? Whatever that may be, if it's whatever you're thinking about in terms of what are the challenges that you would like to sort of get more information from and partner with academics and consulting companies. The second is resource. Where do you get that resource from, and how do you evaluate the resource? And then the third is, what kinds of barriers and challenges are likely to take place? So Akin, just your thoughts in terms of how you've experienced this work so far.
Well, I was going to turn that immediately right back at yourself, John. So yeah, hey peeps, how are you all doing? If you want to just drop a little hi, hey, a thumbs up, something in the chat box, it would warm my soul. So John, you mentioned like the Harvard research and kind of working with the team there. So tell me a bit about the criteria for that, because having worked together for some time now, I imagine you have to kind of choose between opportunities. Like sometimes you're going to look for something and sometimes things are going to find you. So what criteria do you choose or use when selecting which opportunities or paths to proceed with?
Yeah, so there's several things. One is, first of all, you need to find an organization that is willing to participate. In the particular case, the Harvard study particularly, they were collaborating with one of the professors at London Business School who knew us and worked with us. In fact, is our founding partner, Dan Cable. So that's number one. So a shared interest, obviously, would be quite important. The second is, for me, it has to meet, I would say, 4 key elements. The first is it needs to allow for transfer of useful knowledge to the individuals that you're going to be ultimately giving this information to. So if it's something that is maybe so arcane or so niche that it wouldn't be relevant in a more broad sense within organizations or within for individuals, it may be less interesting in terms of supporting the development of that research or those ideas. The second is it needs to in some cases, it needs to evoke some sort of an emotion or some sort of opportunity for individuals to think differently. So one of the things that we know is that when you're able to find opportunities where individuals can be challenged in the way they think about things or the way they do things, that tends to create either a tiny bit of anxiety or a little bit of hopefulness or whatever that may be. So something that's going to capture people's imaginations, allow them to say, this looks interesting and exciting, and I'd like to find out more. So capturing emotion, creating curiosity. The third, it should challenge participants to imagine a new and different way of working. And the last, of course, is that, and this is something that we saw in the immersion session yesterday, which was absolutely fabulous, was it needs to provide lasting impact and changed thinking. So as long as you're looking at those kinds of initiatives and working with companies, or with academic institutions that can provide that, then those criteria should keep you in good stead in terms of being able to evaluate whether you should work with those companies or not.
Super. And I guess we can also talk about the resources element of your slides while we're at it. Were there any like resource issues that you came across when working with Harvard Kennedy School?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there were a couple of things. One is that, of course, academic institutions, and particularly academics, and you're going to speak about this a little bit later when you talk about some of your work with Dan and so on. They're very busy people, so you need to be able to find ways to engage with them that allow them to stay front of mind for you and your work, and also to really set at front some very clear objectives and guidelines. So what is it that we are trying to accomplish here? What is the thesis statement that we're trying to prove through the research? And then good academics will just take that forward and develop really brilliant, well thought out questionnaires or different types of experiments that can try to prove the thesis. So that's the first thing to do, to look at. The second is make sure that you have a project leader, somebody within the organization or within or you yourself personally, who's willing to take on that burden and responsibility of actually guiding the project along, because you need to be able to support the academics and the consulting companies in those particular cases. The third is, where will you begin to look for those types of non-traditional, beyond the usual suspects? So a couple of things, local universities. We're right now looking at partnering with a local technical college that's down the road from us called New Bucks University, and they have a Center for Positive Leadership. And it's a relatively new organization, but there are some very dynamic and very creative and very excited and passionate academics working within that institution. And they're just down the road. So we're thinking this could be an excellent opportunity to partner with them to think about ways that we could start to look at some research around what we do. Second is what you do, which is reviewing academic papers and looking for cutting edge thinking in some of the studies that you've reviewed. The third are, business case studies, working with companies and developing business cases directly with them. And then obviously professional associations like L&D Cares, absolutely brilliant place to find those relationships and those partnerships. And then lastly, and this is a little bit counterintuitive, but I'm sure many people that may be participating in our session today will have thought of this, which is the creative associations like the Royal Academy of Arts, Personal Networks, and so on and so forth. Really brilliant. And then the last thing, if I can, Akin, because I want to give
Go for it.
to talk a little bit about the barriers that you need to overcome. And there's a number of different things to, just about the mindset of the academic and keeping them fully engaged in the process. But most important, it's time. You have to be realistic in terms of the time it takes to go from defining the thesis statement to actually creating meaningful, publishable research or case studies. It does take time and a bit of a commitment. So with that, I'd like to move forward to the next slide, which is your opportunity to talk a little bit about how you've experienced that through your work with Dan.
Yeah, thank you very much. So yeah, I guess I'll kind of like briefly pitch this. I guess Squeezing the Orange is the product of research in action. So the role that I perform myself with Ascentic is the product of job crafting, which, I'm sure a lot of these ideas have been around for some time and been remixed, but like at Ascentic, one of the things I've been able to do is craft, and to be able to find out what I'm good at, what I enjoy, and what I believe people could make use of. Out of that, I collaborated with Dan Cable, professor at London Business School, and I approached him and I presented him the idea of myself being a stand-up comedian and him being a professor in psychology to work together to produce a podcast which breaks down social science. A lot of these papers are very dense. They're peer reviewed, but they're not really something that's like mainstreamly consumed. So we read these research papers and we do the podcast in a way where we break down the ideas. We have a lot of fun with it. So it's a very light listen, and we try to just squeeze the best bits. And that's essentially what Squeezing the Orange is. The criteria for it, just to use some of your key points from earlier, John, the criteria is it has to be top research. Dan researches finds the papers that we cover and make sure that they're from the top academic journals. So we don't just look for salacious headings. We look for what is actually in the top tier science. On top of that, the resource, as you mentioned earlier, time is the big one. And we just try to make sure. We originally were doing the podcast weekly. It was becoming a bit of a crunch, so we now do it every other Wednesday, available on podcast apps. And finally, the main boundary that we had was fun. That was one big condition, that Dan was like, he does this stuff for a living, and he was like, I will only do it if it's fun. I said, Dan, you're talking to me. I will only do it if it's fun. So we try to present social science in a way that's fun, digestible, and just a lot more approachable. And I think we're kind of like, speaking of squeezing, I think we're kind of squeezing on some time here as well. I'm yet to see any messages.
Magically appeared.
Hey, Jessica.
Jessica, there you are, keeping us honest.
Your 5-minute warning. However, it looks as though the next session doesn't start till 1/2 So if you go a little over.
Oh, well, wonderful. That's great. Well, we will only do that if the audience gives us permission. But thank you.
Without permission, and that's okay.
Well, I guess the question to the audience is, how have you found it yourselves? Like, in terms of trying to find things that are at the cutting edge. Like, there's there's so many websites. If anything, there's too much information out there at the moment. How have you found it? And as the comments come through, if the comments come through, we'll try to address what we can. And I'm not sure if there's anything else that you wanted to say in the meantime, John, while we wait patiently for for some comments. And what I'll do while we're waiting, actually, I'll post a link to Squeezing the Orange. It is available, however, on podcast apps, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts from. You can get into it, but I'm going to give a direct link just below. So yeah, John. Go ahead. John.
Because I put the podcast link on the slide as well. I went on to Apple, the apple.com site.
Ooh,
and
go ahead.
And you have 59 episodes uploaded, which is absolutely amazing. I didn't appreciate that there were so many excellent podcasts that you and Dan had developed.
We are grafting. Jane asks, "Are you on Clubhouse?" So the short answer is no. However, I was having a big conversation about Clubhouse. Jane, could you elaborate while I waffle on a bit, please, just in terms of what you'd like to know about Clubhouse? So, John, are you familiar with Clubhouse?
I'm not actually, no.
Okay,
so this is learning for me.
Yeah, for John, and partly for myself, actually. So Clubhouse is this new social media where what they've been able to do is capitalize on the pandemic situation. So they've created an app which allows people to essentially create their own forums, but these forums are live. So the same way that we're talking right now, but you can do this through the app. People can follow one another. They can gain followings, get their messages out there. But it seems that one of the key things, it's about kind of, ideas are at the forefront. It's also one of those apps people can use for several different reasons. So I'm sure there's lots that go on in this app, which probably doesn't need to be spoken about just here. But it seems one of the big uses for it is people are getting together and they're sharing ideas in real time. In ways that have not been seen before. So this is very innovative. And additionally, and this is my personal belief on this, I think what Clubhouse is adding to social media is that people are communicating face to face and in real time. So unlike something like a Twitter where you can, there's more potential to misunderstand what someone says, Clubhouse seems to be enabling people to connect on a one-to-one level. But no, I am not on Clubhouse, but I'm kind of keeping an eye on it. I got a bit inundated with a lot of the apps and the social media, so I ended up deleting a whole bunch of them, and this might be my slow re-entry to the world of look at me, I have something to say.
Ah, brilliant! That's fantastic.
Yeah, there's only
well, Akin, what I'd like to do now. Are there any other questions that have come up?
No other questions that I can see at the moment, and this is your official 5-minute warning until the next session begins. So whatever you do with your bonus 5 minutes,
all right,
we're going to ask.
I will.
That's not question.
Wonderful. Well, what I'd like to do, Akin, is as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, or excuse me, not the podcast, of our session today, is that we were involved in this study with Harvard, and I would like to give you an update on what happened with that study. And just to give you a sense of the time involved, the study actually was started in 2016. So it's been ongoing for about 2.5 to 3 years. And then it went into a period of being written and edited and peer reviewed. So it's taken a pretty long time, but I'd like to share the results if that's okay.
That is okay.
All right.
I will give you permission, John, to share the results.
So the results of the Harvard study, we are really excited. We found out in the fall of 2020, one of the few bits of good news that came out of last year.
For us.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not sure everyone was ecstatic about it.
Exactly, for us, exactly. We were approved for publication in the Academy of Management Journal, which is of the journals that nobody reads, this one's really quite high on the list. So we're really
high on the list of prestige. It's so prestigious that no one's allowed to touch the pages, and
nobody reads it. Exactly. And it should be published very shortly with the next few volumes of it. But the three claims that were made, the three things that we were trying to prove through this research that we supported Harvard in, was we were able to prove. First was knowing and sharing your best selves improve team dynamics. We know that from the Senior Fellows Program. We also know that best self-activation, the idea of knowing who you are at your best and how you have your greatest impact on others, also improved cognitive function and decision-making at the team level. So it is there's a direct application to high-performing teams, which was great news. And the third, in a parallel study that was going on, what they were measuring people's response, physical response to receiving positive feedback and experiencing positive emotions. And this reinforced what a lot of the literature has already shared with us over time, is that experiencing positive emotions makes hearts healthier, strengthens the immune system, and increases resilience against stress. So it's the growth mindset, Carol Dweck, it's Barbara Fredrickson's work, it's reinforcing all of those things that have come before. If you feel good and you feel good about yourself and you're experiencing positive emotion, you're likely to be happier and healthier, which kind of makes sense in my mind.
It's one of those things that's like really obvious when like the science kind of like presents it. And what I would say as well, because I know on the podcast, Dan and I always joke that no one reads this stuff. And, you know, we're having a laugh about it now. Like a lot of this research, what happens with it is it finds its way into our lives in unsuspecting ways. So it could be some of the books that we read. It could be some of the products that we consume. It could even be events that we attend. I'm sure this event, even in itself, is influenced by research that has been previously conducted. So we do joke about no one reading it, but the people who do read it have a life and career advantage over everyone else, because you become the individuals who are able to shape the way an industry or an organization, or even at the individual level, your life looks. Okay.
So I was thinking, when you guys were saying best kept secret, is it really just, the one that nobody reads? Is it really more of a best kept secret that doesn't need to be a secret that anybody could potentially access, read, check it all out?
Yeah, exactly. And actually, as L&D professionals, we are potentially a conduit to bring this type of knowledge and research into our institutions in support of what we're trying to do with our learning and development work that we do.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff, and we encourage everyone as you're thinking of building your network.
So it is great stuff, and another way in which it does transpire. A lot of the academics, especially if they're really able to work their marketing game, a lot of their research translates into the books that they write. Like I say, it finds its way to us, and they'll present it in possibly a prettier fashion. But you really can get in. This stuff is not that challenging to read. I run around London telling jokes. That's like part of the way that I make a living. And I've been able to get through several of these papers that have been published. And there's some parts of it are dense and a bit cumbersome. And there's other parts that the insights just like pour in. And once again, if you'd like some more of those insights, Squeezing the Orange, myself and Professor Dan Cable, we squeeze this research. We talk about it. We present it in a way that's much more easier to digest. And it means you don't have to get through like the journals unless you really want to.
And then if you want to pick up that research and see about its application directly to what you're doing, you, Akin, have already done some of the heavy lifting. So that's really fantastic. So thank you for that.
All right, so with that, we are at time. So
all right, I'm just going to go to the last slide and say thank you.
Beautiful. What we really need to know for folks that want to continue the conversation. So a huge thank you to both of you for spending.
Jessica, it's been a real joy and treat to be here this week with you, and thank you for inviting us, and thank you for letting us share a little bit about what we do.
Of course, this has been fascinating, and I really think that you should tell that the journal. I think you should really tell them your tagline for them and see if they want to adopt that in their marketing. The best one.
The best journals nobody reads.
Yeah, I think that's right. We're not using that. They totally should. All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much. And we have 2 sessions starting in the next few minutes. We have one with Tina Bjork and Larissa Jones about design thinking in action, and then another with Robin Stocker on play and learning. So if you want to check out those should both be starting relatively soon.
Excellent.
Right. So thank you both, and enjoy the rest of your Friday.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us, Pete.